Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode we added ADS into our game, so now we can go into ADS mode and just shoot using the actual sight of the weapon. I also added this to the M16. In this episode we're going to start working on our throwables. So the first thing we're going to create is a grenade, but we're going to add a few other things as well. And the important thing is that the script will be very generic. So you're going to be able to customize it and create many different kinds of throwables using this one script. So in order to create a grenade, we first go into our stylized weapons pack, we go into the prefabs and we can find this grenade prefab over here. We're going to drag it into the scene, then we're going to unpack it from being a prefab. Next we're going to remove the box collider and we're going to add a more suitable collider, so it's going to be a capsule collider, and we can see that it actually makes more sense to use this collider. Another thing that we want to add is a rigid body, so physics will be able to be applied on this object. And the only thing that we're going to change inside the rigid body is increasing the mass to about 3, and we're also going to make it continuous so it will detect this object better and it won't by mistake pass through walls or something like that. Now we're going to collapse both of these and we're going to add a new script on this object, and we're going to name it Throwable. So this is going to be a generic script that is going to be placed on all of our throwables. So all of our grenades, all of our tacticals, basically everything that we can throw. Inside the throwable script, we're going to have a few variables. So first of all, we're going to have 3 different floats. One will be the delay, one will be the damage radius, and one will be the explosion force. Next, we're going to have a private float countdown. And we're going to have 2 booleans, has exploded and has been thrown. And another thing that we want to create is an enum that will simply contain all the different throwables. So this way we're going to be able to specify the specific type of throwable and then do different kinds of things with it. And for now we only have a grenade. Then we also want to specify the throwable type of this specific throwable. So on our grenade, we're going to set this variable to be a grenade inside the inspector. Then inside the start method, we're going to set the countdown to be equals to the delay. And this delay simply determines how much time will pass until the actual throwable is exploded. So if you don't want to have any kind of delay, you can just set it at 0. Inside the update method, we're going to have an if statement that is going to check if this throwable has been thrown. And if it has been thrown, we're going to start this countdown and it's going to decrease 1 second at a time. And when the countdown reaches 0, then it's going to explode. And another condition we need over here is to check if this throwable has not exploded before, because we only want this to happen once. We don't want this to keep exploding every time. And of course then we set the has exploded to be true, and it means that this will be false and it will never happen again. Now we're going to generate this explode method. And over here we're going to get a throwable effect, because each throwable will have a different effect. And I'm not only speaking about the visual effect, but also the actual damage and the effect that it does on the surroundings and on the enemies, because a grenade will deal damage, but a smoke grenade will not deal damage. It will simply create some kind of smoky effect, and maybe it will also blind all the people inside the smoke. So each kind of throwable will have a different effect. Then we also want to destroy the actual game object. Now we're going to generate this method as well. So inside this get throwable effect, we're going to have a switch statement, and this is just to check what is the type of throwable. Because if it's a grenade, we're going to call this grenade effect method. But if it's going to be a smoke grenade, we're going to call another method that is going to be named smoke grenade effect. Now we're going to generate this method. So this grenade effect method is only for a grenade. So inside this grenade effect method, we're going to first instantiate some kind of visual effect for the explosion. So we're going to get it from our global references singleton. We're going to instantiate it, and we're going to position it at the position of the actual grenade. So this will be the visual effect. Then we actually want to do something that will affect the other things, the enemies, the objects around. So this will be the physical effect. So the first thing we want to do is get information about all the objects that were impacted by this explosion. And we can actually do it with a thing called overlap sphere. So imagine there is some kind of sphere that goes out from our explosion, from the grenade, and it simply detects all the colliders inside this area. And the size of this sphere is determined by the damage radius, and it needs to be radius, so let's rename it radius. So if we have an enemy inside, it will detect its collider. If it has some kind of brick or some kind of house, then it's going to detect its collider. And then we get all of these colliders and we store them inside this collider array. And then we can simply loop over all of these colliders and apply some kind of effect to them. So the first thing we want to do is create some kind of explosion force. So we simply want to push all these items. So in our scene, I placed a few blocks, and when we're going to throw the grenade in the middle of these blocks, it will simply push all the blocks to the sides, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. Over here, we're also going to add the actual damage done to enemies. Later in the series, when we're going to add enemies, then we're simply going to reach the enemies inside this code, and we're going to apply some damage on them. Now, of course, we need to create this, so let's copy this variable. Let's go into the global references singleton, and over here, we're simply going to create a public game object grenade explosion effect. So this will be a reference to this explosion effect. Now, of course, you can use any kind of explosion effect that you like. I'm going to use an explosion from this pack. So it's a War Effects pack, it's free, and it comes with different kind of explosions. So I opened up this War Effects folder, and if you go into the War Effects, then you go into the Effects folder, and you go into the explosions. You can see that there are other effects over here as well, but if we go into the explosions, we have different kinds of explosions, and now I'm going to use the explosive smoke. So we need to drag this effect into the grenade explosion effect. So at this point, the grenade should explode and we should see this effect, but it's not going to work yet because over here inside the script, inside the Throwables script, we said that only if it has been thrown. And then when this will become true, it's going to start the countdown, and then it's going to reach 0 and it's going to explode. So before we throw the grenade, we first need to pick it up, right? So let's take our grenade and let's position it somewhere on the table. So I simply positioned it on the table. Of course, we also want to make it into a prefab, so we're going to drag it into our prefabs folder, and now it became a prefab, and we can also add a few other over here. So we have a bunch of grenades. Then inside the interaction manager, we're going to find this area over here inside the update method. So this is when we try to interact with a weapon. This is when we try to interact with the ammo box and pick it up. So now we need to do the same thing for the grenade. So we're simply going to copy all of this and paste it over here. We're going to rename it to Throwable, and we're going to do a few changes. So we simply change the ammo box to be throwable, and then we simply check if this item that we hit is a throwable. Then we're going to be able to enable the outline so we can see an outline on the actual grenade. And if we press on F, then it's going to pick up this throwable and we pass inside the throwable. Now we change this because we also need a reference to the actual hover throwable. So let's create this. And it's very similar to what we had with the ammo box. All we did is change the kind of item that we want to pick up. Now we're going to create this method inside the weapon manager. And we can find this method created inside the weapon manager. So we're going to create a new region for the throwables. And we're going to make this public. So inside this method, we're simply going to create a switch, and then we're going to check what is the type of throwable that we're trying to pick up. So if it's a grenade, we're going to create this method to pick up a grenade. And of course, it needs to be a throwable type. And we're going to generate this method. And we're going to create this at the top. So the same way we have a count for our ammo, we're also going to have a count for our grenades. But as I told you, this is not how it's going to work. We're only going to count the amount of lethals we have. And then we're also going to have the type of lethals that we have. So we're not going to hard code it as the grenades. Then after we added 1 to our grenades count, we also want to update the actual UI. And we're going to do it by creating this method inside the HUD manager. And we're going to pass inside the grenade. Again, this is not the final way it's going to work. So let's go into this method. So inside we simply receive the throwable type, and then we check if it's a grenade. Then we're going to search for the amount of grenades we have, and we're going to update the UI. Then we also want to get the sprite for the grenade, so we're going to do the same thing we did before. We go into our resources folder, we find the grenade sprite, and then we're going to set it to be the lethal UI sprite. Now that's a good opportunity to tell you that there is some kind of fix we need to do that I didn't notice in the previous episodes. So if we go up over here, we had these methods to get the ammo sprite and the weapon sprites, and this is not the actual correct way to do it. We don't need to instantiate this. We only need to return it. Otherwise, it's going to instantiate a bunch of sprites into our scene and we don't need it. So we're simply going to remove this instantiate part and these closing brackets. And the same way over here, we remove the instantiate and these closing brackets. And do the same way for all of these places that we instantiated the sprite. Now we want to actually place this sprite into our resources folder so we can get it over here. So if we go into our resources folder, we can find the different sprites, and I already have this grenade sprite over here. So all I did was go into our FPS icon pack. This is something we downloaded a few episodes ago. So we go into the light pack and we have all the different icons over here. So you simply find the grenade you like, you drag it into the scene, and then you go back into your resources and you drag it back inside, and then you give it a name to be grenade, so it will match the name over here. But I already did that, so I'm going to delete it. And now what will it do? It will simply come over here, get the sprite, and then it's going to set it over here inside the little slot. Now, before we test this out, we also want to add the outline on our grenade. So we go and click on our grenade, and we're going to add the outline. So again, it's not this built-in outline, but it's the outline script that we had, and we're going to disable it. So let's apply it for all the other prefabs. So now when we come over here and we hover over the grenade, it's going to outline it. And then when we press on F, it's going to add it, and we can see in the UI, we have one grenade, and when we pick up the other one, it's going to increase it, and the third one, it's going to increase it. Next, we want to deal with actually throwing the grenade. So we're going to open our weapon manager, and inside the update method at the bottom, we're going to add some code. So we're simply checking if the user is releasing the G key, right? Get key up. So when the user releases the G key, it's going to check if we have more than 0 grenades. And if we have more than 0 grenades, it's going to throw the grenade. So again, we're not going to actually check the grenades eventually. We're going to check how many lethals we have. But for now, let's just keep it simple. And again, it's very important that you do get key up and not key down or something like that. Now we're going to add a few more variables over here. So this float will simply control the force that we apply on throwing the grenade, because maybe we want to throw the grenade close to us, or maybe we want to throw it far away. So we're going to use this throw force for that. Then we also want a reference to our grenade prefab. Another thing that we want to create is some kind of point in front of our player that the throwable will spawn in. So we're going to name it throwable spawn. And now we're going to add both of these into the inspector. So first of all, we're going to take our grenade prefab and we're going to drag it into the inspector of the weapon manager. And next we need this throwable spawn. So on our player, we're going to create a new game object and we're going to name it throwable spawn. And we're going to position it somewhere in front of the player. So we're going to position it somewhere over here. And of course, you can create some kind of primitive object to see where you're at. So we can make it small. And then you can simply position it. It's also a good idea to use this, and then you can simply align it with the middle dot. So it will be in the middle of the screen. Something like that. And then when you have it in the middle of the screen, in front of the player, you can even make it a bit closer. But I already have the exact positions that I fine-tuned. And eventually you just want to delete this cube and only leave this throwable spawn. So for me, the position is going to be 0, 1.55, and 1.8. So it's going to be somewhere over here in front of the player. And now that we have this throwable spawn, we're going to drag it into the weapon manager. Then back inside the weapon manager, we're going to scroll down to our throwable region, and we're going to add another method that is going to be named throw lethal. And we already have it over here. So let's see. Oh, we have it over here. So let's just take it and place it over here. So inside this throw lethal method, we are going to get the actual prefab of our grenade. Of course, this is not the way it's going to be. Eventually, we're going to calculate and check what is the lethal that we equip, because maybe it's not a grenade, maybe it's something else. But for now, we're going to hard code it as a grenade, and we're going to store it inside this lethal prefab. Then we're going to instantiate this grenade, and we're going to instantiate it at the position of the throwable spawn that we created. And we also want to set it to be according to the rotation of the camera. Next, we're going to get the rigid body from our throwable, and we're going to add some force to it. So we're going to push it forward, and again, it will be the forward of the camera, and we're going to multiply it by the throw force, but also multiplied by the force multiplier. And this will be a variable that is going to help us control the force. So if we press on the G key and hold it, then it's going to increase the force, and when we release it, it's going to throw the grenade with the force that was accumulated. So we're going to create this as well, and then we also set a force mode to be impulse. Then after that, we're going to reach into our throwable, and we're going to set it to be has been thrown, because we want to start the countdown for the explosion. And then we're going to reduce one grenade from the inventory, and we want to update the UI. Again, this is not the way it's going to be eventually. So let's create this force multiplier. And of course, it's going to be 0 in the beginning. Let's also decrease the throw force to be 10, because it's going to multiply the throw force by the force multiplier. And then we go into the update method. So as long as we hit and hold the G key, it's going to increase the force multiplier. And when we release it, it's going to throw the lethal, and then over here, it's going to multiply both of them, and we're going to get a different throw force each time. And then, of course, we also want to reset this when we release. So force multiplier. Now for the sharp ones out there, you probably noticed that we have a potential bug. We can basically hold the G key and it will increase the force multiplier endlessly, right? But we don't want to allow it. We want to set some kind of limit to the force that will be applied. So we're going to add another float over here. And we're going to set it to be 2 for now. Of course, you can play around with it. And then we're going to come back over here. And after this is increased, we're simply going to check. So if it reaches beyond the limit, it will always reset to the limit. And now we can finally test this out and see if everything is working. So let's pick up a few grenades. And now we can see that we have 3 grenades, and we're going to throw it over here. And let's see if the explosion force will actually move these things. So now I'm going to hold the G key, and you can see over here that the multiplier will start increasing. And then when I release the key, it will simply throw the grenade. And of course, right now, it reached the limit, so it will not go beyond 2, even though I'm still holding the G key. And now I'm going to release it. And if I'm going to hold it for a second and then release, it's going to throw it near the player. So I can control the force. And you can also see that each time that I throw the grenade, it reduces the count over here. So right now everything is working. Of course, we still have some work to do on our throwables. First of all, we want to be able to make it more generic. So we only have one type of lethal, and then we're going to simply pick up a lethal, for example, a grenade, and it's going to be counted as a lethal. But if we pick up another lethal, it will simply switch between the two, and this way we're not hard coding the grenade. And we also want to add tacticals, so we need to add all of this code that will also support tacticals, for example, a smoke grenade or a flashbang. So all of this we're going to do in the next episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, please leave a like, it will also help me a lot, and see you next time.